From the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts.
And the Oscar goes to.
And the Oscar goes to.
And the Oscar goes to.
It's our time to have wage equality.
Call them on the phone. Tell them you love them.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Ago, the Director of Programming for the USC School of Cinematic Arts. Today we'll be talking about the Academy Awards in the first ever podcast from the School of Cinematic Arts. And I'm here with a distinguished panel of colleagues who I will invite to introduce themselves.
I'm Tyger Williams, a adjunct professor here at USC and a screenwriter of Menace II Society and most recently The Perfect Guy.
Hey, I'm Katie Walsh. I am an alum of the School of Cinematic Arts, and I'm a film critic for the LA Times, the Tribune News Service, and Indiewire.
Hi, I'm David Isaacs. I'm a professor of screen and television writing in the screenwriting division of the School of Cinematic Arts. And I've written a lot of television, a lot of sitcoms, including Frasier, Cheers, M.A.S.H, and some films as well, including Volunteers with Tom Hanks.
On today's podcast, we're going to talk about several of the major categories for the Academy Awards, films that we think were deserving of this, films that might have been overlooked, some issues surrounding the selection of those films, and various other things, including technical categories, predictions, etc. But I'd like to actually begin by getting a better sense of how the Academy functions. And to do that, I'd like to ask Tyger, who is a very recent new member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, to tell us a little bit about, first of all, what it was like becoming a member of the Academy, and then we can transition into talking about how films are voted upon for the nomination.
I'm part of the most recent class, the 2015-16 class, the largest class, I guess they just most recently let in. I think something like 340 or 370 something members, as the Academy has already started efforts to increase their diversity, which I wasn't aware of at the time. I was approached by an Academy member, a fellow professor here, Howard Rodman, who I've known for years, and asked me if I was interested in the Academy, and then the process he disappeared, and the process sort of took on a life of its own, and then he called me back and said, well, yeah, they don't hate you, so, wait for the mail. And, so then I get packets and stuff, and it's, part of, if you choose to accept this invitation, and of course. So I guess I'm not, only having recently been in since October, I guess I'm only qualified to talk about the process by default. But in terms of, nominees, each branch, we only get to nominate, as a member of the writer's branch, I only get to nominate Best Original Screenplay, Best Adapted Screenplay. And I also get to nominate Best Picture, which everyone in the Academy gets to nominate Best Picture. Right. So that's pretty much the process in terms of nominees. And then, each branch sort of, presents all their nominees. That list later comes out. And now we're actually at the point where, we're all voting for, the entire Academy.
So what's the process like? Let's take in the screenwriting categories. Are you given a list of eligible films that you then rank, or do you select films without necessarily having the full list of however many were submitted? What does it look like when you nominate something?
Yeah, there is a pretty large list to choose from in terms of nominating films. I don't believe every single film that was released was on that list, but quite a few were on that list. So clearly you may be swayed by some of the films that clearly, the studios are making an Oscar push and screeners are showing up and you're seeing ads that are specifically dealing with writing. So, there's that element to it. But I want to say I may have nominated films that I liked just sort of, maybe from the spring or whatever, that probably had no shot, but, that I really thought, could have been really good screenplays.
Are you given instructions to, for instance, not vote for any more, not no vote for any more than say 5.
Yeah, I think you can vote for. You don't have. You can vote for up to 5.
Up to 5.
And you don't have to vote for
4 or 5.
4 or 5. Right. Because it's something about like your first choice, and so depending on how many people their first choice, if everyone's first choice is tallied up and that's whatever number that is, then that gets a certain nomination, and then your second choice that's tallied up, and then so it keeps rolling over until they finally combine it and come up with the list.
Oh, so you do rank them in that selection of 5. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's interesting because we're going to talk about the 8 films that were nominated and then take a look at the films that weren't nominated, and we can talk about what our favorites were. But the fact that we have 2 empty slots in a year that's being heavily criticized for its lack of diversity is, I think, possibly highlighting some changes in the structure of the nomination process. Not necessarily that people should have voted for different films, but that in an effort to be inclusive, those slots should have been filled by the second most popular film, and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit about the Academy's policies in a bit. So we have 8 feature films nominated for Best Picture, including The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Mad Max, Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, Room, and Spotlight. So maybe we can just start by talking about, if you had a preference, which one of these films would be your favorite?
Well, I'll start. I think all in all, I've narrowed down to 2 that were on this that were my favorites. Well, actually, I throw in 3, but I'll say 2. I really enjoyed The Big Short. I thought that was kind of a breakthrough film, just in the way it was presented, and my other one would probably be Brooklyn, which I think is a kind of transcendent sort of performance, but also a sort of transcendent story about America, especially at a time when I don't usually get into the politics of it, but especially at a time when the idea of immigration is such a hot button issue. So I thought it was a nice kind of balance to that. A little, let's take a second and remember everyone came over here at some point. So I think I liked it more for that. I also liked Room a lot, which I thought was, and for me to like that film or sit through it is saying much for the film, because I don't like any film where a kid is being, psychologically, not to mention, physically abused is tough for me. So, and yet I couldn't look away. So it was. But if I had to pick one, I guess I would say, all in all, The Big Short, because I just kind of thought it was a great Hollywood movie on a very tough subject,
I would pick, I know it's never going to win, but I would love, love, love if it won, Mad Max Fury Road. My pie in the sky pick is Mad Max. I'm so excited that it was even nominated for Best Picture, because I just never thought that would happen. So that to me is, it's such a overtly feminist movie. And I think that is, I love that people sort of recognize that about it. And, you never see action movies or even films of that genre in the sort of typical Best Picture slot. So I was excited about that. And then I probably, as my more like realistic one, would pick Spotlight, which I just thought was so excellent. Just Hollywood filmmaking at its finest, and it's very unshowy. It gets the job done, but I was totally enthralled by it. I also loved Room and Brooklyn. I mean, I actually like a lot of the movies on this list, which is kind of surprising for me.
I wish I had seen Mad Max not in 3D.
Oh, yeah.
I went to see it in 3D, and it really kind of threw me out of a lot of the subtlety of what the conversation was after I left it, which I don't think landed with me in the same way, just because, and probably has to do with my age, but
probably too overwhelming.
It was a bit overwhelming.
Sensory overwhelming.
For me. And I'm a big Tom Hardy fan. I was a big fan of the original movie. I thought it was a great upgrade, but I was kind of like, I'm getting a little
I saw it both times. I saw it twice in theaters, both times in regular D. And so I think the second time though really solidified it for me because I was able to kind of get over the wild, visuals of it and kind of hone in on like some of the more details of the story. Yeah.
And George Miller prefers it in 2D as well. We hosted a screening here, and typically when we host a film that's available in 3D, the studio insists that it be screened in 3D. Yeah. And in this case, they specifically asked, because it was a sneak preview where the filmmaker still gets a decent amount of say as to how the film is presented, that George wanted it presented to the students in 2D.
I think it's the little boy in me that I get excited to put the glasses on and over my glasses, and then about 5 minutes in, I go, I wish I wasn't seeing it this way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, for me, I love a lot of films this year, actually. Brooklyn is actually a screener I never got. So
oh, no.
It was like the one that I didn't get. I didn't get an email asking if I didn't, whatever. So, like, please, somebody let me have one. Spotlight's probably my film this year, that I just fell in love with. The Big Short was, excellent. I thought, it's like, the only way you could deal with that subject is in a comedic fashion.
Yeah. Otherwise you'd get too mad.
Yeah. It's so serious, and it's so like, how else do you, how else do you tell that story?
Yeah.
So I thought that was just an amazing job in terms of what they did with that story. But
as a writing professor, I think I tacked on like 10 extra points of bonus for the exposition being handled so beautifully.
It was beautiful because it could have been so clunky, right?
Like I love it just for this.
Yeah, so clunky, and we all lived through that, and we've read about it.
Yeah.
But how many, so many people, they never quite got it, and what those guys were doing, and how it all happened, and they're watching Spotlight, and it's like, a master class, and this is what happened, So yeah, Big Short was great, but Spotlight would probably be my pick for Best Picture. It was The Revenant until I saw Spotlight. Because something about The Revenant, it just felt like clearly, the big Hollywood epic set.
Kind of stuff Hollywood doesn't make too much anymore.
Exactly. It just it just felt huge like that, and it was amazing. And then I saw Spotlight, and just to take that to take that subject matter. And to make it so nuanced, and the acting was so amazing, and the writing was so strong.
Well, it says a lot for both pictures. If you're talking about that and Spotlight and The Big Short, is most of the villainy is off camera, so you're really a lot of it is left to your imagination. So the storytelling is pretty excellent when you can grab all of us that way. Because I enjoyed it as much, and maybe my perspective is a little bit more towards All the President's Men, which was a sort of was sitting in my mind the whole time, and I was sort of comparing them. Whereas I guess The Big Short to me was just, this is new material, and I know, I haven't seen anything quite like it this way before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I agree with Tyger that Spotlight is my favorite out of this selection of films. Although I think there are fantastic things about just about everything nominated here.
Yeah, it's a good list.
In some cases, formal elements that I found very exciting, and I think we'll talk about that more specifically. But the technical achievements of The Revenant, the experimentation and style of The Big Short, the world building of Mad Max, the performances of Room, and the performance of The Martian, which is a film entirely carried on the weight of one actor. I think all of these things are worth celebrating. So I think that it's a strong selection of movies, but we also should discuss maybe a film that, obviously, since we know that other films were left out, what movie doesn't belong on here?
I gotta go Bridge of Spies. I just watched it, and that movie is the cinematic equivalent of listening to your dad lecture you about the Cold War. It's it was a slog. It looked beautiful, and it was amazing the cinematography was amazing, but I couldn't get into it. But it's Spielberg, it's Hanks, it's it's beloved figures. So I get why it was nominated. You know, it's a historical drama, but I don't know. I couldn't do with that one.
I'll go with that. If I was going to drop one here, it would be Bridge of Spies. I mean, some great actors, and Mark Rylance is incredible.
Yeah.
Sort of, what he does is a lot of nonverbal stuff. So it's if the story itself isn't that compelling, you know, I'm kind of overlooking probably a great performance, but I could never get into why I wanted to be interested, I suppose, is the clumsy way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My thing with Bridge of Spies, which I guess is the consensus, is that it was a technically superbly made film with with obviously this great performance,
great made.
It's a thriller with no suspense, and it's really it's a Cold War story that I really felt absolutely no tension in, and I think that on that level, it's really not using all of its craft to achieve a whole lot more than being something that's well made for its own sake. And hopefully, when we talk about some of the other categories, we can talk about why its form, let's say, of something like The Big Short actually does add to the overall experience of watching the film. But the Academy does have a fairly long history of selecting films that are unoffensive, let's say, or not particularly jarring, in the sense that both its craft isn't especially experimental, or its subject matter is the most appealing to a mass demographic. And so for me, Bridge of Spies kind of fulfills those categories. Mm-hmm. I can see why it's very easy to understand why the Academy membership might not have nominated something as daring as Tangerine, yet put something like Bridge of Spies in its best picture category.
Well, it checks a lot of boxes, as you said, in the sort of traditional Academy best movie area. But I could probably think of 2 or 3 spy exchange type movies that were a great deal more dynamic than that one. So I've always got other movies in my head. It was like in comparison sometimes, and this just never grabbed me. So I'm going to have to go upstairs and bow down to the Spielberg sign and say I'm not worthy after this. But
genuflect in front of it.
And I didn't mean any of it.
This is the portion of the podcast
great.
that will
made
be
it beautifully. Better than 1941, no question.
Let's talk about some of our favorite films that didn't get nominated. They may have nominations in other categories or no nominations at all, but failed to get a Best Picture nomination. Tell us about some of the films that you think were overlooked.
For me, I definitely have to say Straight Outta Compton was overlooked.
Yeah.
I don't really know what else to say about that one. That's, and I thought, I could have seen Sicario in the running, quite easily. Because it's interesting, when we talk about Bridge of Spies and, it checks those boxes and that's why it's there. Whereas you have, a film like The Room, Room, which is great, but it's such a small, intimate, non-Oscar seeming film at all. Yeah. So there's, and I would never, take it off that list because it got there. The same, years ago, people were complaining about why did Winter's Bone get a nomination, which I loved, and, but yeah, it's interesting because it's just hard to say what.
Yeah. It's definitely. I don't understand the idea that there were only 8, and we talked about what the choice was because if. I was also perplexed about Straight Outta Compton, also Beasts of No Nation, which I thought was, but I would watch Idris Elba or read the phone book, so I'm going to vote for that. Listen, my favorite movie this year, if I just said it, if it was anything I was going to vote for as the best thing out there, was Amy. So I I start with that, and then there's a lot of things I saw that I think we could add. Sicario, I also kind of stuck up on me. I thought was a really good movie. Had its flaws, but those are the ones I'd vote for.
I'd go with, I think Creed was totally overlooked, and I don't usually get mad about I've realized now that the Oscars are, it's like who sends the most screeners, who does the most luncheons, who does it's all about marketing and awards campaigning in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't think it's just that, but I recently caught up with Creed, and I totally think it should have been Best Picture, and I think Ryan Coogler should have gotten a Best Director nomination because the directing of that movie is, I mean, the emotions are spot on, and then the boxing scenes are spot on. I think it's fascinating that all three of us said movies with African-American leads in them as like missing out, because why are they not on this list? Is it like a point spread thing? Like they have to reach a certain number of points to get on the list or something, like ranking, or I don't know.
With Creed, it's interesting. It almost makes me think of, there's like that long time belief in the Academy that you almost have to, age into it.
Yeah.
Like it took Newman how long to win an Oscar?
Right.
Like he didn't, he won one late in his 60s. He didn't win it, way back when he was doing, so it's almost like you can see Academy voters saying, "What? Kugler's 28?
Right.
He'll be there again.
Yeah, we'll get him later.
Get him later."
I got to say, I wonder if there's also a sort of diminishment of the brand after 6 Rocky movies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And suddenly the next best Rocky movie, or maybe you might even say as good as Rocky 1, is Rocky 7 or whatever it is now.
Yeah.
With a totally different brand and a totally different director. But still, there's a sort of diminishment of, there were so many bad Rockies, like 4 or 5, that were just like beating the same drum. And now suddenly you come home with a totally different perspective and a much more depthful kind of story that a lot of people didn't see it, or a lot of people didn't, I've seen this 1,000, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Mostly I think it's people who didn't see it.
I don't think Warner Brothers knew what they had, because I don't think they were screening it a lot before it came out, and it came out right before Thanksgiving. And I think there was the first press screening of it, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is great! Like, why haven't they been screening this for months for word of mouth screenings?" And I think they kind of bungled that release a little bit, because I think it was kind of, people were surprised that it was so good.
Yeah. Well, these 3 films that feature people of color in the lead roles, 2 of them were huge hits. One of them was one of the biggest films of the year in Straight Outta Compton.
Yeah.
So it is, especially considering that these films also got good reviews, they are very notable absences.
Well, I'll just say, if you want to lay it at the function, I mean, we can talk about the lack of diversity in the Academy, and clearly the numbers speak to that. But if you wanted to talk about how it functions in a practical way, those movies are probably the way those movies got left out. It's like if you've got a Academy membership that's 97% white, any number of those people are over 60.
Yeah.
They're just not going to they're not going to go see
Straight Outta Compton.
Straight Outta Compton. They're not into the legend of NW, those guys. And so they, I mean, if you wanted to lay it at just a membership that isn't in touch with what's going on, that gives you a perfect example of it.
Well, I'm curious to know how the voting broke down on Beasts of No Nation, because in some sense that was the easiest one for them to see. They didn't have to leave their house.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Netflix model, I think, will become increasingly interesting in awards races. It kind of fell short this time, despite a lot of marketing and a lot of very good reviews, and I think a lot of discussion about diversity. This film still didn't get nominated for anything, and yet it was readily available on a brand that is known for high quality original productions, which theoretically would be something that Academy voters would watch. So let's.
I'm with Beasts of No Nation. I've got to think that the politics of the Hollywood machine and the Academy have to come into play. You know, Netflix is basically an outsider, and in an industry where they're not going to screen their films theatrically. I mean, they did a few theatrical runs just enough to qualify,
bare minimum.
Just to qualify. And so you have distributors. I mean, the fact that it's, you know, to nominate that for a Best Picture would validate that model. And I could see distributors trembling, saying you're bringing our industry down. So I don't think there was any way possible. Had it screened in a bunch of theaters, it might have gotten a nomination.
Distributors and exhibitors would certainly be of that opinion.
My fault.
No, but distributors too. But the fact is that Netflix is employing a tremendous amount of people who vote: directors, producers, writers, grips. I mean, cinematographers, editors. They are employing the industry, and will continue to increase jobs for people who vote. Not to mention the fact that Netflix is acquiring films.
Yeah, I was going to say Sundance.
And that is an incredibly bright star in the world of independent cinema, because filmmakers are going to markets now and selling films to Netflix for much more than they could have hoped for, immediately taking films out of debt and being able to make their next films. So I think that just based on the fact that Netflix is serving a very useful function as an acquirer of films, and now increasingly as an employer of people who work in the industry, their clout will rise.
Absolutely.
I think Netflix and Amazon acquired the most films out of Sundance, I believe.
And they're paying well for them,
Yeah,
too.
they're paying really high.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year or the year after. But I think that this is really the tipping point where Netflix would be excluded from this category because of animosity towards its model.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because they've already conquered, you know, primetime. You know, they've been winning Emmys for the last, you know, and Amazon won Emmys this year.
Yeah.
You know, so that, you know, the train's left the station on that.
Yeah.
I just want to throw out that my favorite film of the year that wasn't nominated was Sicario, and perhaps the debate that Katie Walsh and I could have about that movie is better served for another time.
Better served for not recorded.
I would like to take 5 minutes to just pitch Bernie again, which I'm still angry about from 3 years ago. How that movie.
We're not talking about Bernie Sanders.
I'm not going to. I'm talking about
It's a great movie.
I'm talking about the movie Bernie. It still angers me. I mean, it just, you know, sometimes you carry these things forever.
I'm also going to throw in a movie that got completely buried in this year's commercially, to some extent by some critics as well. But I was a big fan of Steve Jobs. And I want to talk about this more when we get to the screenwriting category, because I think that its structure is really worth discussing, and the choices that they made. But it has a fantastic set of performances. It was in my opinion, a very compelling film. And I wonder if its consideration as a flop, like a major Hollywood flop, immediately disenfranchised it from awards beyond its acting categories. The screenplay, shockingly to me, wasn't nominated, despite the fact that Aaron Sorkin won a Golden Globe.
Yeah, I would have thought, if anything, that would have gotten a nomination. My theory on it was it feels more like a stage play than a movie, in my own opinion of watching it, and that its thoughts and its dynamic was not as readily adjustable as, let's just say, The Big Short. You know, it just didn't have the same kind of grab you factor, I suppose. For me, I speak only for myself, and the millions that follow me.
And apparently the millions of people who didn't go see the movie. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fact that the Academy Award nominations have been decried by many as lacking diversity. I mean, it's not slander. It does lack diversity, but we can examine a little bit about first of all, if that's the Academy's fault, if it's purely a factor of their nominating, their membership, or if there are greater systemic failures in the industry at large that have created this problem. So I think I'm just curious to hear your individual takes on this, what your thoughts are in terms of the representation. We've just all talked about great films that have African-American filmmakers, actors, and yet we don't see that reflected in the nominations in just about any category. And of course, the great irony of the Oscars, is brilliantly pointed out by Saturday Night Live, is that Creed's nomination went to Sylvester Stallone, and Straight Outta Compton was nominated for a writing award to a white writer. So I just I think if anyone has ideas or thoughts on this, please speak up, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Academy's demographics.
I mean, I hashtag Oscars so white. I did not sort of, I said before, I'm not emotional about the Oscars anymore, because I think that they're like, I'm not like, this person was overlooked, because it's not a meritocracy. It's based on all of these other forces. And I just think hashtag movies so white. Like, I don't think it's just an Oscar problem. I think it's a whole industry problem. I mean,
I agree.
There's studies from USC that show that, the representation on screen is like sorely lacking. I mean, Stacey Smith at Annenberg does a study every year, and every year it's like they look at gender and sexuality and diversity and LGBT representation, and every year it like doesn't change at all. And, it's like the people who are behind the camera too, and the people who are making decisions. So it's not even just like, oh, we need more people, like need more diversity on set. It's like, we need more diversity in production companies and at agencies and in management companies and sales agents. Like every single, arm of it, I think sort of leads to this problem. So I think just focusing on the Oscars is overlooking, we can say, oh, they need more diversity. And I do think they need more diversity, because the numbers are shocking. The diversity numbers in the Academy are shocking. But I think big picture. That's the problem.
For myself, I ironically speaking, the one thing I'm looking forward to most of anything is Chris Rock's opening. Yeah. Because I mean, talk about delicious irony. I sort of feel the same way as Katie does about the awards themselves. I think they're for me, they're sort of overhyped, and it's another sort of Super Bowl, but of the arts, I suppose. Yeah. No one in the streets, everyone at a party. I mean, it's become that. It's all wonderful, and we all make our living out of the film business, so all the better. But I think it's one thing to state the obvious, which is we need more diverse faces in the industry. As I agree with Katie again, it's not just the Academy. We need it in the industry. We need it at our school. We need it in every place that feeds entertainment. That's obvious. The tough discussion to me, and it's a greater discussion than we can have right now, is it's one thing to state the obvious. It's another thing to change the culture. Yeah. And that takes some time and push in some cases, and just inertia in other cases. I think if you want to add it all up, this year is going to be a great first step in expressing the awareness around the country to the problem, and but it's an ongoing process. It's just an ongoing process that will hopefully get better.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree with both of you. And it's the entire industry. It's not at all just the Oscars. It's the gatekeepers. It's the decision makers. It's more diversity in terms of the people who push the buttons in terms of getting movies made and hiring filmmakers, people of color, women, ultimately it's all for the greater good, I mean, Katie, you mentioned, Mad Max earlier. I mean, that's diversity, you know? I mean, so it's it speaks across the board, to the possibilities of the kind of films that can be made. So, I mean, it's, it's sort of, working in the business. It's interesting because people, like the hashtag came from outside of the business.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when and then working within the business, you're looking around like, well, that's how it's always been.
Right.
So it's not, I've been in the business 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Oscars so white, business so white, always been so white. I mean, that's just the business that I've worked in,
Right.
I've done what I can to help people, to mentor people, and I'm sure other people do the same things. But yeah, I mean, it's systemic, and it'll take, it's changing the culture. Is what you said.
Yeah, I to me, it's like, don't be afraid of the mess. I mean, maybe even the bigger picture of the country, what's going on now. Don't be afraid of the mess. Let it get out there. Let it be heard, and let it settle itself in some ways. We have to do things, but we also have to kind of let it be a little bit. Let it be what it's going to be.
Well, what's interesting is every time I watch the Academy Awards, you look at the audience, and typically there's a lot of celebrities, and you sort of get a sense that the Academy is run by a bunch of hip young movie stars.
Yeah, right.
But in fact, it's sort of an opaque private club, and we don't know too much about it. But they do add and invite people in the hundreds every year. Of course, there's a certain amount of people that pass on, and therefore the Academy membership sort of stays level. But out of its roughly 6,000 members, the percentages of Caucasians is somewhere around 97%, with 2% African American, and then everyone else less than that. Not to mention the fact that only 23% are women.
That's really surprising to me.
Yeah.
And then in what's possibly the most shocking statistic is that the average age is 62, 63. Now that makes sense in the sense because it's a membership for life. Mm-hmm. So as people get older, obviously that it's going to be, considering that people are living longer, the age is going to get pushed up. So the question is, how can the Academy make some adjustments to try and make the people that are voting more representative of the people
Can
that
I make
are
one
working
suggestion?
across the...
To have the voting, make sure the voting is when most of those people over 62 are on cruises and miss, you know what I mean? Just they're out of town or they don't get the ballot. I mean, do some statistics on that because...
But they have the most time to watch all the movies and
absolutely right.
do all the, they're going to the screenings and they're watching all the screeners and everybody else is probably having their assistants fill it out. But then that might actually reflect in more diversity.
Actually, Katie, you bring up a very, very good point, which is that voting with a sort of base ethic that you've seen everything that you're voting on requires an incredible time commitment.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this has created problems in other categories like foreign language film, where you're actually trying to sift through closer to 80 films, documentaries similarly. And it's to be expected that the only people that can really do that are people who are not full-time employees working in the film industry.
Yeah.
So the people that do typically attend a lot of Academy screenings tend to be older and not necessarily employed. And for the time being, and I think that this is changing, people who have been retired from the industry for many, many, many years have been allowed to vote on the Academy Awards. So part of what I I've read the Academy is doing is reevaluating who is eligible to vote by looking at the distance between when they were last working and where they are now, and sort of transferring them to an emeritus status, which they can then become re-eligible as an active member by working on a film.
Did they say, isn't it like a 10-year thing? Like it's a 10-year membership, and then you get lifetime if you do 3 10-year memberships, but it also depends on when you last worked on a film.
If you have if you work professionally in the film industry, 1 year out of a decade, that covers you for the 10-year span. And then so someone who has made three films in 3 different 10-year spans does in fact get to vote for 30 years.
Okay.
And other there's other ways that people are allowed to vote indefinitely, such as being nominated for an Academy Award or winning one. You don't ever have to work again. Apparently, you can vote until as long as you choose. But that does obviously mean that in this year's nomination process, there were a lot of people who may not be particularly in touch with the contemporary film scene. And there's obviously nothing that they can do now retroactively to fix that problem. But it does seem to me that the Academy is trying very hard to address these problems. I don't think it's discussed enough that the president of the Academy is an African-American woman who cares very much about this issue. And there's movement, but part of it isn't just who are they inviting, because it seems like in the past few years they've really ramped up reaching out to people who didn't feel or realize that they were eligible, but then also looking at how the ranking system may reflect some of these demographic biases. Tyger, you've been working in the industry for many, many years, but you only now joined. And part of the things I've read about Academy outreach to people of color, at least, is that they wanted to strip away the illusion that you weren't eligible to join the Academy. So you mentioned that you were sponsored by Howard Rodman from faculty here. And part of what they've said is, in fact, that they're trying to find people who have been working, and they need other members to help point them out. It's sort of, you would think that this would be a little bit easier to do. Feature film comes out, see who wrote it. But with so many thousands of people working in the industry, they're now seemingly committed to finding the people that are getting left behind purely on the misinformation that they're not eligible. I did want to mention that the other major initiative that Cheryl Boone-Isaacs, the president of the Academy, has done in the past couple of years is to remove the cap on the amount of Academy members, which is very important.
I think that's maybe more important than some of the other effects, or the other effects with an A, that are being trotted out there.
I mean, it seemed kind of morbid to me that there was a cap on the Academy, because you'd have to wait for someone to die until you could join.
Nobody wants other people in their club. You know how it is.
The Academy Awards started as like a dinner for the industry to get together and clap each other on the back. So
there is a kind of, it's a tough one because look, as somebody who's past that age, I don't belong to the Academy. I've been in the Television Academy, but doesn't have the same obvious kind of gravitas. But I'm in trouble now. But as someone who's 60 and maybe over 60 and speaking to that, I would think there's troubles even there's complications even in coming up with these formulas for going 10 years and then you have to be on something or have worked on something, because you're immediately kind of saying that someone who was the Academy being a big part of the Academy being the legacy of Hollywood and the legacy of the film business, those people have to count as valuable links to that legacy, and then you're just going to say, well, we're going to put you on an ice flow and move you out into the river.
You still get free screeners.
Was that in The Revenant?
I think it was in Uncle Tom's Cabin. But that's it. You know what I'm saying? It's going to take a lot of talk and a lot of sort of figuring to come up with some equity on, equanimity on how this is going to work. So, because you're kind of contradicting yourself a little bit when you come up with these rules. So that's why I think taking the cap off it is an even better idea.
Yeah.
Let people come in. Don't necessarily, winnow down the membership as let other people balance it out. I think. Anyway, that's me at my age.
Well, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of the performances and some of the technical categories, and then get to our predictions for this year's Oscars.
Ooh, exciting.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the show, make sure to subscribe to the SCA Podcast Network on iTunes. We're going to be releasing a bunch of great stuff every week, including Q&As from our on-campus screening series and exclusive interviews with SCA alumni, faculty, and students. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Welcome back. This is the Oscar Podcast for the School of Cinematic Arts. We're going to move now into a few of the categories from the Academy Awards this year, and I thought that we could discuss a little bit about our favorite performances of the year. We don't necessarily need to single out each individual category, but maybe just give us your impression of, first of all, your favorites among people who may have been nominated, but also performances that were overlooked by the Academy.
I mean, looking at these lists, the ones that pop out to me, I thought Brie Larson in Room was incredible, and that movie, I love that movie. I cried beginning to end the whole time, which for me, I guess, is like a fun experience at the movies. But she was amazing, and that's a performance-driven movie. I wish Jacob Tremblay had been also nominated.
Top of my list of performances missed.
Yeah. He's amazing, and he's so young, and you see him on the red carpet, and you realize what a little kid he is, and then you're astonished by how amazing he was in Room. And I think that's such a performance-driven movie.
I think that highlights something that I saw last year with J.K. Simmons in the lack of Miles Teller's nomination, which is that Room, like Whiplash, are films where the two performances complement each other.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both exceptional, and one is being touted and given every award there is, and the other one has been completely forgotten about.
Yeah. Or just the way that Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara are in different categories, that Rooney Mara is in supporting, when really Carol is such a two-hander. I mean, it's two lead performances, really. So it's weird how they have to split the difference, but they end up both getting a nomination. But yeah, those two, Cate Blanchett's performance could not be what it was without, and vice versa, without Rooney Mara.
Exactly. I'd agree on Brie Larson. I thought she was amazing, and it's one of those things that it's almost pure performance, And I forget how to pronounce her first name, but Saoirse. Saoirse. Yeah, that's like Siobhan. Yeah, Saoirse. Ronan in Brooklyn was like, I think that's one of those kind of really transcendent performances, and really in a movie. I think that will live on. Hardy in The Revenant, because once again, I've never seen a guy who can just bury himself in a part like that. I'm going to make one quick comment, and that is, as much as I liked Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight, and was a very Ruffalonian performance, I thought he got incredibly overlooked in another movie called Incredibly Polar Bear, or Infinitely Polar Bear.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought the people at Sony, I'm going to go on record as saying this, the Sony publicity department completely botched that movie.
Didn't he get a Globe? nomination, or what did he? He got nominated for something for that.
But he was that was a performance I would have loved to have seen in the Best Actor
something
category. Although all these people were fantastic and that are nominated, but I just thought I brought it up in terms of a performance that's not listed.
Speaking of miscategorization, one of my favorite performances that did get nominated was Alicia Vikander in The Danish Girl, who I found far more compelling than Eddie Redmayne in that film, and yet she gets relegated to a supporting actress role when she is equally the protagonist of that movie.
Right.
And that you have to chalk up to the publicity departments of the studios making an educated guess that she would have a better chance at winning an Academy Award if she's put in that category.
Yeah.
But I found her performance far more moving, actually. And I'm glad to see that she got recognized, although, again, I don't think it was a supporting character.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that Brie Larson was incredible. Such a strong performance, a haunting performance. Hard to watch, but you can't look away.
Yeah.
So I mean, I thought her performance was amazing. Pretty much anything Tom Hardy does, you have to keep him in the, I mean, I think, The Revenant and, Mad Max and even, what was it, Legend?
Legend, he's great in Legend.
Yeah,
actually.
so it's just, let's just give everything to Tom Hardy this year.
Well, that's the Tom Hardy in every movie that he's in.
I was desperate for subtitles in that movie.
Yeah.
In Legend?
In Legend.
Oh, yeah. But also his accent in The Revenant is like a weird Southern Philly accent that I was like, I don't know if you quite nailed that one, Hardy, but maybe it's just going above my head that I don't know where the provenance of this accent is from.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of the performances that were nominated. I think that Matt Damon carrying that entire film, The Martian, with charm, pathos, humor, energy. It was really amazing for a film of that scale and that popularity to really have come down to one person's performance. And I think that while I may not necessarily vote him in for the Oscar, I think that that film worked because he was so great in it.
Yeah, he was good. I mean, it's sort of it's a shoo-in. I mean, you put one actor on the screen for 2 hours, and if they don't botch it, if it's good at all, it's a nomination.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, I actually think that while I'm happy to see Leonardo DiCaprio possibly take home an Oscar in general, I really don't think that The Revenant was the one to give it to him for, and yet I feel like he's a front runner purely based on his career. This is a film, The Revenant, that I think has many, many qualities, but I don't necessarily think it was a particularly transformative performance, because I think the things about The Revenant that impressed me were not my identification or empathy with the main character.
I mean, like you said, Tyger, like the Academy has this idea of someone aging into whether or not they're going to be, I think, Leonardo DiCaprio, they're like, it's his turn. It's his time. He's tried for so many years. He crawled inside a horse. Like, give it to him. Yeah. But he doesn't have any lines in that movie. He just like grunts and crawls around and interacts with steaming carcasses.
It's very interesting how this works on a gender dynamic. Have you noticed that, on the other hand, you have an overwhelming amount of best actresses and best supporting actresses over the past 20 years that are women in their 20s?
Yeah.
And with the exception of Eddie Redmayne last year, a lot of the best actor winners are typically men above 35. Yeah.
Well, maybe it goes to the, there's no good roles for women over a certain age. I mean, Charlotte Rampling is representing here for the older women, and I think her performance in 45 Years is great. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of like that's how they always have like the older male and the younger woman, sort of like the Oscars are.
You don't always get
skewing.
it. Sometimes they just give it because it's time, and it's like perfect example of me is Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman. I mean, that is most memorable by far. It's not his most memorable role, and yet okay, it's Al's time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think Leonardo DiCaprio should have gotten it for Wolf of Wall Street, if anything.
Certainly one of his best performances in a film where, had it not been for the incredible tide turning towards Matthew McConaughey in that year, it would have easily have gone his way otherwise. I wanted to highlight my favorite performance of the year, other than the cast of Room, who I think are exceptional, in a film that nobody seems to have seen, Mississippi Grind.
I love that movie. It's so good.
Ben Mendelsohn in that
Amazing.
film continues to astonish me in his range, even within one performance, not to mention the span of his entire career. I really hope that people find this movie. I know that he was nominated for a Spirit Award for the performance. And Ryan Reynolds is fantastic in the
He's
movie
also
as well.
really, he's great in it too.
I also think that we're missing Michael Shannon from 99 Homes, a film that potentially could have gotten some nominations in other categories, screenplay. And then any of the films that we've already mentioned. I think the cast of Straight Outta Compton was fantastic. It's the cast of Beasts of No Nation.
I mean, I thought the lead, Abraham Atta, was, for a 12-year-old non-actor, I thought that was an incredible job. It's an incredible job. Like, what does a director say to a child? How do you explain that to get those performances? The kid just reached in and found something. So, it's a tough field. I'm not saying that obviously he deserved a lead actor, but
I think that the exclusion of both child actors that made a real impact this year is interesting. I'm not saying that we need to start radically expanding categories so that you get every good performance in there, but it's a shame that neither of them made it. I feel like it's a real accomplishment. So let's turn to directing. We have incredibly different films and incredibly different styles. So maybe when we talk about this, we can also highlight some of the formal elements that made these films interesting from a directing standpoint. Does anyone have a particular favorite in terms of the way that they chose to tell their stories?
Well, there's some that are, if you take Spotlight, for me, it's just good, relentless directing. It's just, he's got a story to tell, and he's telling it in the kind of leanest way he can with as many characters as he has at his disposal. So there's nothing particularly showy about it. Big Short has a real, a much more sort of showy directing style to it, for me anyway. I'm still amazed at, the one thing about, for me, is I'd probably still give it to The Revenant, because you don't like to, I guess, hand these out like they were candy to people, but the guy's just he's got his own, it just pulls me into every movie. So I'm just notwithstanding my kind of movie, I suppose. And also I just think I'm in it. I'm like in the movie, And once again, I wish I'd not seen Mad Max with the glasses on.
Well, I think just what George Miller was able to achieve with the staging of Mad Max, all of the practical work, all of the stunts. My favorite scenes in Mad Max are the ones at night, because you've got the mixing of the color temperature between the blue night and then the lights that they have. So you've got the orange and the blue going on, and people have said, oh, it's just like one long scene because they go on a car chase and then they go back. But I think the fact that you're so emotionally engaged the whole time and you're so invested in the outcome of what is kind of a loosely structured movie is pretty impressive. I also think Spotlight, anytime the directing is so effective but so invisible, right, I think is really, really impressive, and you don't get enough, that doesn't get enough credit. I do like The Revenant too. I thought it was beautifully shot. I think I don't think movies should be as long as 2 hours and 45 minutes, but
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. I think I wish I used to say that, or I've been saying that, I wish they would add a time an extra time on each theater, so the studio can say to a director, "I got to get 6 of these in a day. So cut it down whichever way you want, but it can't be more than 2 hours and 15 minutes tops. That's it. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would make movie making better right across the board.
I agree with you completely. And I do like The Big Short too. I think what Adam McKay did was really bold, and I don't think all of the like wacky editing choices worked totally for me, but I like movies that are like weird and out there, and I think that for a big studio movie about a financial crisis with movie stars in it being like as crazy as The Big Short was, I totally commend that.
You know, the editing in The Big Short reminds me of a Godard quote. If you make a mistake, it's a mistake. But if you make the same mistake 3 times, it's a style.
Yeah.
and so as I was watching The Big Short, I'm like, really? That's where he chose to cut? I mean,
Right.
what kind of conversation did he have with his editor?
Yeah.
Right.
And then when I realized that he was doing little tricks like that throughout
Right.
the movie,
Yeah.
I was really impressed.
Right.
You know, it sort of, you know, your film viewing is not complacent. And it's
Yeah.
a topic that you shouldn't be complacent about.
Yeah, no, it keeps you on your toes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, with Mad Max, the interesting thing for me is, you know, for George Miller to come back and make, you know, Mad Max again, and to make it seem so visually different, so stylistically different. I mean, I think that's just an incredible feat, you know, to basically step back into your own work,
Yeah.
and reimagine it and recreate it. You know, I thought it was incredible. And with The Revenant, I mean, you know, Inarritu could come in here and with a camera and he'll get nominated again for shooting this podcast next year, you know? I mean, the guy is, I mean,
Only at Magic Hour.
the guy, he'd create Magic Hour. He got the darkness here, and I mean, the guy's incredible. He's incredible.
Yeah, he is.
You know, and then The Big Short. You know, I mean, that style was unique and it was interesting, and it's kind of unsettling, but it suited the movie. You know, I mean, I thought it was like, you know, he chose the right style and the right way to tell that story. You know, so I thought he did a really good job.
And it's also a bold departure for Adam McKay.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah, when you go down the list, all funny movies,
Yeah.
but, you know, the same guy who did Ricky Bobby did
Exactly.
this movie.
Yeah.
Going, well, that's give him a lot of points for
definitely.
stepping up the game in a way that was profound.
and you know, unapologetically bringing his strengths.
Yeah.
You know, not trying to hide who he is as a filmmaker, which I think is great. I wouldn't necessarily, you know, pick The Revenant as my favorite film of the year, but I would say that the accomplishments of this film, from a directing standpoint, for me, are exceptional. I mean, some of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And what I think that comes down to is the way in which he used technique. In many ways, some of the stuff that you don't notice, for instance, this film has to have been absolutely bathed in visual effects, because some of the things that you see in those long tracking or long take shots couldn't possibly have happened without them actually taking great care to create that world. To talk about the natural, you know, lighting, but besides that, the immersion into this world, to me, seems like a Herculean effort that he did seamlessly. Especially that the attack sequence in the beginning of the movie. No, not the bear.
Oh, the attack. Yeah, that's amazing.
The bear was an accomplishment.
The
in
bear's
itself.
amazing.
But the epic sequence when their camp is attacked knocked me out of my chair.
Yeah.
And you know that you're seeing someone with incredible gifts working with precision and passion.
That scene is amazing.
But a lot of these things, obviously, it's interesting because Spotlight, which was my favorite out of the bunch, is the one that has the least visible directing.
Right.
And,
Most definitely.
And that's interesting. There's many choices made in Room. You know, that film obviously gets a lot of attention for its performance. But if you hear Lenny Abramson talk, you know, there's a lot of decisions in terms of the psychology of how to present the space, when to show certain things, how to how to maintain the point of view of the kid, when to take us away from that. And that's also pacing, and that's also editing, and there's a lot of invisible work that he did there too.
Yeah.
That then allows the performers to give the performances that they gave.
And I think when they return to the room, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but like it looks so much different than it did in the beginning, and I think that's when you realize how much work he did to make the room the space that it was in the beginning of the film.
Yeah, because you think of a film like that as how well he worked with the actors.
Yeah.
But you forget how much where the camera is and how he uses the camera is as important in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to kind of pick out some of the associated things that go along with these films, for instance, I think that we should lavish production design awards on Mad Max, and I would be perfectly happy to see The Big Short's complete editing anarchy somehow.
Exactly.
Rewarded.
Yeah.
But are there any other things about each film that you think would be worthy of taking home the Oscar?
I mean, I think The Revenant should take cinematography. Emmanuel Lubezki, or is that how you say his name? Lubezki? I don't know how you say his name, but that the cinematography to me in The Revenant is incredible. It just looks so amazing. And yes, editing for The Big Short, Mad Max design. I mean, that could also be cinematography for me too. Or stunts. They should give an Oscar for stunts.
I've got to say, in music, not to downplay one of the greatest scores of all time, but giving Star Wars a nomination here is a little bit like, to me, the free space in bingo. I mean, it's the themes. Obviously, it's a new score, and you change the themes, and you change the orchestration or the arrangements and things like that. But I mean, come on, you get a.
And this will, of course, be the second portion of our podcast edited out.
Yes. I can't say that.
Well, since we're editing that out, I agree with you. But for this reason, I would
stare at the John Williams.
No, it's like it's the same score. It's not quite the same score. It's
not.
Score.
It's not, but it is.
But that was my only knock on Star Wars, because with Creed it was the same score, but a different score. But it captured the emotionality of the first one, but changed it just enough.
Yeah, it just references it.
But this new Star Wars score, it didn't make me feel the way the original.
Right.
And so that's why when I.
Well,
like
a lot of it was homage. If we're just going to cut this out, I will say that.
I was joking.
No, I had a lot of other issues with the movie. Certainly, it was fun for all who love the movie, but it suddenly for parts of it turned into like August Osage County in outer space for me, and I was kind of like, do we need all this kind of like love and
that'll be our next
heartfelt
podcast.
Where
what
did we go
really
wrong?
Think of Star Wars?
No, there's whole sections of where did we go wrong,
From the Lucasfilm.
in our marriage, and I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't sign on for this.
Well, I have a big bias in this one as a lifelong fan of Ennio Morricone.
Yes.
And I just think it's one of those amazing situations where someone gets an honorary Lifetime Achievement Academy Award and then is suddenly nominated and could potentially win. I also loved the score to Sicario.
It was great.
Yes.
And it's hard to imagine that film without that. So, I mean, I would just love to hear Ennio try to speak English again. And I would be equally happy if Sicario got at least some recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I would definitely have to say Ennio Morricone. It's yeah, absolutely. And for cinematography for me, I mean, I think just the look and the feel of Sicario was amazing.
Roger Deakins,
and the fact that Deakins doesn't have one yet.
Yeah. No, he does have one, right?
He's been nominated, right? But he doesn't have one.
Ton of nominations.
And so here's where you get into the politics of Academy voting.
Yeah.
Right. Is it? Is The Revenant better? Cinematography, perhaps. I don't know.
I mean, I would prefer it, but it's like it's like so hard to put like
Yeah.
It's art, like
Yeah.
that cinematography for Sicario is exactly what Sicario needs.
It's
but, for The Revenant, that's what it needs. So it's like, how do you
So
say
then it's
this
like, well,
one
what are
is
the other
better than this
factors?
one?
Oh, wait, Deakins doesn't have one? Let's give him one.
Yeah, and like Emmanuel Luzbecki, whose name I'm going to keep messing up, it has won before for Gravity, I think.
Yeah.
Twice.
And
in a row.
Birdman?
Yeah.
Yeah, see.
yeah,
So this
so-
would be
Yeah,
this
it
would
should be
be a
his third
third
one.
Oscar in a row.
He could take a year off. Let's give Deakins one. And then next year he could come back.
I want Ed Lockman to win for Carol. I think Carol was amazing, but I do like The Revenant too. I mean, the cinematography in Carol was, and they shot on Super 16, so.
I love that the Hateful Eight got a nomination for the great irony that he shot it, to be projected in 70 millimeter, and it's all close-ups.
And it's all inside.
Yeah, it's there's three amazing shots in that film, and then the rest are just obviously trying to tell an intimate story. So I don't know that it needs to be in there because except for the beauty and novelty of shooting on film of that scale, of that size, I don't think it was used particularly to tell the story.
Yeah.
And I think that a key to what these awards, what people try and do with their craft is to tell the story through these various things like music and cinematography. And I just don't think that the cinematography in that film will be in any way remembered besides for the novelty of the fact that he shot it on 65 and screened it with his own personal projectors on 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
Let's turn to what I hope is a very dear category to two of our panelists, the writing. I think, again, we should talk about a little bit about sort of the content and stories that you were particularly excited to actually see, and then screenplays that you were excited in the way that they were written in terms of their structure and certain decisions. I open it to the floor.
I mean, it's two very strong categories. There's not too much I would say stands out as just doesn't belong. A movie I really liked, and I was happy to see it on the original is Ex Machina. I just thought that was like a surprise. A fascinating film, and I wouldn't have necessarily thought of it so much as screenplay, but it was a really good story. I mean, it was a great story. Inside Out is one of those really kind of what I call thoughtful screenplays,
And the first time that a Pixar film has gotten the screenplay nomination, but not a Best Picture nomination since it's been expanded to 10 films, which is interesting. I'm curious, since, just briefly talking about the Inside Out screenplay, if there's anything that you see in terms of that film not getting nominated for Best Picture as well.
Just the fact that it's anime, it's anime. So, that tends to keep it out of the big time. But you've got to, look, one of the greatest screenplays of all time is Toy Story 3, if you're just looking at writing and how to set up a story and how to sequence and all the things we talk about in the classroom. The thing any one of those could win. Once again, Bridge of Spies. I don't know, but any one of these, I'd say I'd applaud if they won. But Straight Outta Compton, I really thought was a good story, because that's a hard kind of screenplay to write when you're kind of recreating a time and a place and a bigger story, and like, where do you find the right spots to.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Big decisions.
It's like, because a lot of those kind of dissemble into, and then we wrote this song and another movie I liked, and I'm blocking out the name of the film, but it was the Brian Wilson
Love and Mercy.
And one was one half of it was fascinating to me, and the other half was just an acting, sort of an acting display, which which was the John Cusack, Paul, the older Brian Wilson. But not to digress too much. I just thought when you can tell a story and bring out the depth of what it meant to be a part of that time and that sort of breakthrough group, and really tell it in a compelling way. That to me is a really great piece of writing. And it's not going to be thought of that way. It's not showy that way. It's just a good I'm not going to call it an adaptation, but I'm going to call it an adaptation of an adaptation and a focusing on a time and a story.
And if you consider it in comparison to the other screenplays that are nominated, they're based on real people or real stories. It's the one that doesn't have a pre-existing natural structure.
Right.
They had to literally create that out of decades worth of these people's lives.
Yeah. Biographies can fall into that trap, or multiple biographies in this case, can fall into that trap very easily.
Quite, yeah.
And they did a great job of just giving you an arc and we're going to follow these guys.
Yeah. Just even nailing the structure
straight out
of a biography is tough, and when you're arcing over so many years, what do you keep? What do you get rid of?
Winnow out.
What are the, almost like crafting a tent pole. There are the beats that need to be there because those are the iconic moments of the group.
Right.
And then there are then settle in on which characters are you going to tell, and what's the focus of the story. So I thought they did an incredible job of sort of they two of the characters of the group kind of disappeared, but perhaps for the sake of a movie, that's what needs to happen. So I thought just in terms of doing that, working from source material is an incredible job.
Yeah. No, at a time in a year when there's a sort of very noted lack of diversity, I'm very proud that it's writing picked it out. Yeah, it's nice. Art group knows what's going on.
Now, granted, that's half the complaint about the Oscars is because the Oscars is Straight Outta Compton is written by two white writers,
right?
And in terms of this industry, odds are if someone's going to make a Rolling Stones movie, it's not going to be John Ridley and Jeffrey Fletcher, right? No,
no, it won't be.
I guarantee you. So. We'll get back to that.
Just to play the devil's advocate a little bit for Straight Outta Compton, one of the complaints was that it did not have a good representation of women, and it cut out sort of or glossed over some of the women who were integral. Ice Cube's wife, and kind of cut out some of the controversy that Dre had with women and stuff. So that was one of the complaints that people had about Compton. But I really liked the movie, and it's not perfect, but I like the movie a lot. Yeah,
but I think that it's interesting because that sort of, even though Jobs isn't nominated, when you're dealing with true life characters, who have baggage,
flaws,
or things that, when you have the families involved and all of that sort of thing, producing and rights and whatever, there are certain things you can do and cannot do, and then you sort of have to craft a story around all of that.
Totally, yeah.
It was just well done.
So this discussion of how to structure a biopic, or in this case, the story of multiple people's lives, is exactly why I'm disappointed not to see Steve Jobs on here. Mm-hmm. I feel like Sorkin really could have done this in many different ways, and he took what I thought was fair dramatic license to create a compelling and unique structure in terms of how to present the conflicts in his life in a way that had an arc throughout the film. And so from and obviously, David, you and I don't see eye to eye on this, but I feel like the innovation in that structure was very much worth acknowledging, even though the film didn't get any major traction with critics.
Let me ask you a question. Do you feel the subject matter, the bigger story, how can I put this? Do you feel like the very fact that Steve Jobs is such an enormous American story, that that it was that for people it wasn't satisfying. I'm not sure. I agree with you in the sense that it's well written for sure.
I think that there are expectations. I think that people who didn't like the structure put a certain expectation on film as a medium that they don't necessarily put on theater or opera or things like that, or other representational art forms, because he got a lot of complaints that he was just doing too much rearranging and sort of structuring things out of his imagination based on his research and the book and whatnot. But that film, for some reason, has a greater responsibility to tell it like it was, as though that's ever really happened. And it's it's annoying to me because it's a dramatization of something.
Yeah.
It's not a documentary.
Right.
And so I think that if the responsibility that he felt was to tell the truth as he saw it in the characters that he was writing about, I think he did a great job.
Yeah. No, because I'm just perplexed in a way as you are. I guess I tried to explain it to myself, but I'm as perplexed why it didn't have as much impact, given the people that were in it, given all the auspices of the acting troupe, the writer, all the people involved, that it didn't catch. It didn't have the kind of resonance, and I wonder if it was just too esoteric. And
with audiences, you mean?
Yeah, just in general. Well, no, in the fact of I mean, he gets Fassbender gets recognized for it,
And Kate Winslet.
and Kate Winslet, but there isn't. It's kind of an epic story, and maybe because it wasn't told as an epic story, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm just perplexed. I was wondering, a bit of that myself, because it kind of came and went pretty fast, considering the power of that individual on our culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's one of those. It makes me wonder again if it's one of those political things. Like we were talking about, Roger Deakins versus. Lubezki, it's Sorkin is Sorkin.
Yeah.
He's been there before. He'll be there again.
Yeah.
So it could very well be one of those things.
Well, I think that we have a little bit of time to give predictions. Although, since we glossed over some categories, feel free to give a shout out to something that you really liked that we didn't talk about.
Mad Max sound mix.
Yeah. I wanna shout out Mustang and Son of Saul in the foreign language
Son
department.
of Saul was pretty amazing.
I think Son of Saul, I mean, if that movie was in Best Directing,
Exceptional achievement.
You just watch it, like, how did they make this movie? And I think Mustang is amazing, and Denise Gamze-Erguven is like she's one of two women directors who are, I think the other one is Liz Garbus, who directed What Happened, Miss Simone, and so there's only two women directors, which kind of my cross to bear, my cause celeb. So anyway, but it's a great movie, and I love Son of Saul, so I'm really excited about those movies.
Yeah, I said it before, but I'll make another shout for it, and was Amy, which I really fall in love.
Amy's great.
Fall in love during a movie, and I was aware of Amy Winehouse like most people, and knew of her music, but I had no idea until I saw this how compelling an individual she was. And if you want to get some idea, I think, of the sort of madness of creativity and the sort of price you pay, and I don't think I've ever seen anything better to sort of explain the paradox of talent, than this movie. I mean, to sum it up, it's pretty amazing.
I think the documentary category this year is really frustrating for me. Watching a lot of documentaries, I see a lot of what I thought was amazing about documentaries this year in this list. Amy made me cry, and I knew nothing about her.
Yeah.
The Look of Silence, to me, completes a really epic endeavor by a documentarian that I think is an extraordinary accomplishment, these two films together with the act of killing. But actually, I think that if I had push came to shove, I would give the Oscar to Cartel Land.
Yeah.
And I think that is truly a recognition of a fearless filmmaker taking on an important topic and being in the right place at the right time for a story that unfolds in the most incredible way that, that filmmakers often go into movies like that not knowing what they're going to get. And his, what he captured, the story that he captured, he could not have had any plan for.
No.
But he stuck with it at great peril.
That's the definition of a documentary.
Yeah.
And the results were insightful, topical, infuriating, and also from the standpoint of a film, satisfying in some sense, because it's the meat is there, you know. So I'm sorry that so many great films have to compete against each other.
Right.
I wish Disney had produced Cartel Land because I'd love to see the ride.
It's just an
make a
SUV,
really interesting
and people
new-
are shooting into the SUV.
A really new attraction at Disneyland, Cartel Land.
Cartel Land is my Sicario. I mean, I not to compare the two movies because that's not what we should do. Although this is the Oscars, but yeah, I don't know. For me, that was like the drug war movie that I wanted to see. And I just watched Winter on Fire on Netflix. That movie's great. So if anybody wants to check it out, it's on Netflix. Again, sort of like heart-pounding footage that this guy just went to Ukraine, was like, oh, I heard they're protesting. And then suddenly it's a war zone. And it's just incredible what he captures. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable.
What happened to Simone has kind of come on late because it's just sort of getting some resonance now, you know. It's kind of probably an interesting contrast to Amy.
Yeah.
Another very strong film about a musician.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ironic to me that Josh Oppenheimer lost to 20 Feet from Stardom and is now probably going to lose to another documentary about musicians. It's a category that I think every year becomes incredibly difficult. To pick
more and more.
Absolutely.
I want to give a shout out to a movie no one's seen called The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared. It's a very charming movie. Every year there seems to be some bizarre film no one's heard of in the makeup and hairstyling category. I don't know why it's so hard for them to pick films. I mean, but there tends to be something that literally has gotten maybe one screen in U.S. theaters cropping up here, and it's very charming. If anyone, it's Scandinavian, but that's just to recognize the little guy.
Yeah.
I know no one ever talks about this anymore, but I was curious because I didn't see the movie. But in the original song, "Earned It" from 50 Shades of Grey, what was that?
That's by The Weeknd.
Oh, okay.
One of our other, people of color nominees, the few.
I was just curious because it seemed an odd title for a song in that movie. Like, taking time out for a message about planned abstinence.
I didn't see 50 Shades of
to
Grey.
earn
So
it.
I think 50 Shades of Grey might be the only film that I haven't seen.
I was trying to put it in context. Like she's singing a song about you have to earn it. You can't. Anyway, that's how my mind went.
Well, if Lady Gaga wins the Oscar for original song, she'll be on her way to an EGOT.
If you take...
Well, actually, no, she won the
she won
Globe,
but
that's
clearly
not in the EGOT.
she's won a Grammy, so
Yeah.
she just has to do a...
Tony.
like a show on Broadway for like a night and win a Tony. There's
Yeah.
so many
And
categories.
she's win an Emmy.
Yeah.
The Oscar's the hardest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm still sort of recovering from the Golden Globe win.
Yeah, I know.
As much as I love American Horror Story.
I just want to see her and Leonardo cross paths again.
That was great. It's a great moment.
All right, our last major question. Who do we think is going to win this year? Let's limit it to picture, screenplay, acting, and directing. And then what do you think will really be remembered 20 years from now? There's a long history of the Academy Awards giving the Oscar to a film that maybe in the moment had momentum, but that down the line no one really rewatches. Does anyone remember Dances with Wolves versus Goodfellas? Right, that was the big. I think I'm not knocking Dances with Wolves. But Goodfellas,
stands the test of time.
If it's on, you're gonna watch it.
Yeah.
So, what are the expert predictions here?
I think The Revenant's going to win again. I mean, or not again, but I think Inarritu's going to win again for Best Picture. And I think Leonardo DiCaprio's going to win. For actor, I think Brie Larson's going to win. I don't know. This is all like the momentum guesses. I don't, it could be, somebody, but this is just what the tea leaves are telling me. And then for directing, I mean, I'd love to see George Miller win, but I think it might be Inarritu. I don't know.
And so you're saying Revenant for Best Picture?
Yeah, I'm saying Revenant for Best Picture.
And for screenplay?
Oh, original or adapted?
Both.
Oh, God. Maybe Spotlight and The Big Short. Literally just pulling that out of nowhere because I like them.
Well,
David?
You don't have to be right on those. He and I do.
Yeah.
Tiger and I have to be right on that. I believe, I play the odds, and I think, The Revenant probably is the movie that would win Best Picture, and maybe if there was going to be a picture that snuck in there, it would be Spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although The Big Short won the PGA award.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I don't know how that lines up in terms of winning Oscars.
I think it's predicted the last 7 or 8 winners.
Has it?
Yeah,
then I
predicts
guess
a
you'd
lot.
have to say The Big Short will sneak in there. Hollywood's way of saying, how could they have treated us this way? these people on Wall Street. Actor, I think just goes to DiCaprio. That's pretty much the one. I'm gonna say it as an actress because it was such a kind of amazing sort of character arc movie. Give me her name again. Saoirse Ronan. And writing, we're going to writing. I would say the same to that Kate said. I think Spotlight for screenplay and Big Short for adapting.
Yeah, no, it's consensus. I mean, The Revenant, I think, if someone sneaks in, it'll be The Big Short or Spotlight. DiCaprio wins, Brie Larson wins, and The Big Short and Spotlight win.
I agree on the writing categories. And for me, I think that the 3 of the 4 acting categories seem to have very clear frontrunners: Leo, Brie Larson, Sylvester Stallone. I'm curious to know your thoughts.
I don't get Stallone. I honestly don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. I would, if it was me, I'd give it to Bale or Hardy, but
I'd be surprised
I don't know why
if he
Stallone.
wins.
What?
Yeah,
I mean,
Actually,
really?
yeah.
But is there some kind of like, you returned to this role after many years and...
Well, you finally got it right.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the?
But that kind of nostalgic, warm fuzzies.
I guess.
I don't
but
know.
Wow. I mean,
I'd give it to Bale or Hardy.
I mean, he should have
or
his-
Mark Ruffalo.
God bless him, but he could have played that. He should have played that part with his check pinned to his sleeve. Yeah.
Well,
it ain't much.
That's interesting.
It's
I
just
didn't
at a
realize
different
this was
age.
going to be so controversial.
No, I listen. I love Rocky. I love the character. The motion picture. I've always been a fan, but I mean, come on, you're not like going out there and creating a character.
Yeah.
Can we actually establish whether or not there's a front runner in the supporting actress role?
I don't think so. I don't know.
That's
maybe Kate Winslet. Didn't she win the Globe?
She won the Globe in what has been referred to as a big surprise.
Yeah.
And the people who vote for the Globes always
Oh yeah, the Hollywood Foreign Press.
I mean,
people.
if they would just rename Best Actress the Jennifer Lawrence Award,
yeah,
they'd be fine. Until she hits 30 and find someone younger.
Unless there's a lot of resentment against the film or Tarantino, I thought Jennifer Jason Leigh was like the best thing in that movie, and amidst all of those heavyweight.
I don't think there's a lot of movement behind her though. I feel like Kate Winslet or Rooney Mara, or maybe if people have Spotlight,
Is no one talking about Alicia Vikander?
I actually didn't see The Danish Girl.
Oh, okay.
I think you right away. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Jennifer Jason Leigh. It's on, it's like it's sort of when actresses win, like when Charlize Theron won for Monster and Halle Berry won for.
Oh yeah.
It's like, okay, you take an actress, you beat her up, you muddy her up, make her ugly, terrible, beat her up, but you don't fully beat her up. It's like Tropic Thunder. Jennifer Lawrence, she went full ugly. You don't go full ugly. So Hateful Eight, it's just it's an amazing performance. She's an amazing actress.
And a well-respected actress has been around
I guess
for a long time.
I'm just going by sort of the framing of where she is in the movie and all that kind of stuff in terms of with those,
Is this her first nomination?
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know. I think so.
But I have no way of really
I have
figuring
no
this
idea.
out without going to Gold Derby and see.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Alicia Vikander for her like combined Danish Girl, Ex Machina.
Well, Jennifer Jason Leigh had a strong campaign push for Anomalisa.
Yeah, and she's
she
nominated
actually
for
did get the Spirit Award nomination
Spirits,
for that, and she is phenomenal in that film.
Yeah.
She's a great actor. All these.
Kind of glad to have her back. I feel like she hasn't had much going on lately. Did you have you were agreeing with Revenant
For Best Picture?
as a prediction?
Yeah.
I still find that slightly. I always screw this up. I go Gravity or it was Boyhood. For me, I always overthink this award because I'm trying to put myself into the head of the 70-year-old Academy voter, and The Revenant is so cruel.
I know.
It's a hard film to sit through if you can't stomach that kind of violence on
But it's been getting
screen.
so many. Like what? Well, then what explains all the awards it's been getting? Or are we? Or am I just talking about the
still
Globes?
it's still a what I call a cry vengeance picture. so it kind of drives. It's what drives the narrative. It's just what drives the momentum of the film, and that goes over with 70-year-old.
I mean, that's true,
guys.
It's a very. I mean, it's a macho movie.
Yeah, I'm guessing it. That it's somewhat old-fashioned in that kind of storytelling, but I'm just I don't think it's the best of those movies, but I think it's the most showy in its way.
Is it the 2016 Dances with Wolves?
No, I think that it will be studied and watched.
Oh, I think it'll. I think it has the test of time. But I mean, it's like white guy who knows Indians and in the 3 hours long in the wilderness.
And he's alone on screen for the first 25 minutes. Dances with Wolves.
Oh,
that's right.
That's all you got to do is just put one actor on screen, nobody else.
Well, I'm gonna just play devil's advocate and throw in Spotlight as my prediction, purely because there's I think that the style of The Big Short may ultimately be its strength and its weakness when it comes to voters, and I really think Revenant was long and brutal, and that could turn some people off. Spotlight is that film where if you're thinking of a movie that you really were absorbed, compelled by, just drawn in by everything that's happening, that was the movie. And
I'd
think
love to see
could
Spotlight win.
Glean a lot. It would be the film that would draw, I think, votes away from some of the other films.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all so very much.
Fun.
Do you want to?
Quick stat corrections. So Jennifer Jason Leigh was never nominated for an Oscar before. Okay. This is her first.
Okay.
What was the other one? It was
Roger Deakins.
Roger Deakins has not been nominated, so we're fine on that.
Not one.
Never been nominated.
Or sorry, it's not one.
Yeah.
Not one.
He's been nominated.
Stat correction to the stat correction.
And the other one was, I think we were asking about from the Danish Girl. What's the actress's name again?
Alicia Vikander.
Yeah, she did win the SAG award, which is probably the best indicator for
supporting.
For supporting.
Okay.
So other than that, I think we covered everything. Alex, if you want to say those things so we can edit them into the podcast.
Oh no, I think that this is our
this is the cameo.
This is our moment for Matthew Meyer, the brilliant person who put this whole thing together.
I'm like the Tony Reale of podcasting. Just come in for the stat corrections at the end.
Impresario.
Well, thank you all so much for doing this. I hope that we can make this conversation an annual thing.
Let's do it again next year.
I certainly hope that this begins a long series of podcasts that we'll be doing, conversations with filmmakers, other discussions about awards, what we really thought about Star Wars. And I look forward to seeing the results of the Academy's changes, and congratulate Tyger for joining their ranks. And thank you all so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.